The story begins with a boy named Peak, spending his first day in a juvenile prison. Life hadn't been kind to him. He grew up in a world of crime, surrounded by drug lords. His mother sold drugs just to keep them alive. At school, he was humiliated by teachers, treated like he carried his mother's sins. Then came the day the police arrested her. Caught red-handed, she was sentenced to 24 years. From that moment, Peak was on his own, just a kid thrown into a cruel world. One day, while buying rations, a man insulted his mother, calling her a prostitute. Peak snapped. His girlfriend, Par, begged him to walk away. But when the man crossed the line and made a filthy comment about her too, Peak lost control. He pulled the trigger and ended it right there. We next see him in an interrogation room, being beaten by a cop. But since he was under 18, Peak was sent to a youth detention center instead of adult jail. You'd think that would be better. It wasn't. It was prison by another name, ruled by power and fear. The strong crushed the weak, and compassion didn't exist. There, Peak met Fluke, arrested for drug dealing. The warden, cold and ruthless, didn't like the fire in Peak's eyes. "I don't care where you're from," he warned. "Defy me, and you'll suffer." He handed them over to a brutal inmate named Bear. "Break them in," he said. What followed was horror, humiliation, abuse, and the brutal stripping away of their dignity. Their nightmare had only just begun. Cramped cells, no privacy, and no mercy. It was survival in its ugliest form. And for Peak and Fluke, this dark chapter was only the beginning. That night, as darkness settled, Bear gave a silent signal, and suddenly, all the inmates stood up. One of them walked up to Fluke and said coldly, "Get up, the boss wants you." They told Peak to come too, but he refused. Fluke wasn't given a choice. He was dragged and thrown in front of Bear like prey. Begging for mercy with folded hands, Fluke looked around, hoping someone, anyone, would step in. No one did. Bear grinned. "Don't be scared. It's your first day. You'll get used to it." Then he gave Fluke two choices, both horrific. Either give in and become Bear's property, or refuse and be handed over to every man in that room. Terrified, Fluke broke down and surrendered. Meanwhile, Peak was being brutally beaten for standing up to them, kicked and punched until he couldn't even move. By morning, every breath felt like pain. Still, he dragged himself to the cafeteria. All eyes were on him, judging, mocking, waiting. This prison was divided into blocks, each ruled by a gang leader. In one block, a guy pointed at Peak and said to his boss, "Gus, he's from your city. Let's bring him into our crew." But Peak wasn't thinking about gangs. He was just trying to survive. At the food counter, the cook told him the food was finished. Still hungry, Peak was ready to eat scraps from the floor. When the cook tried to dump what little food was left, Peak grabbed his hand. "Why are you doing this to me?" he asked. The cook sneered. "You meddle in everything. This is the price." Then Bear stepped in and slammed Peak's food to the ground. Everyone thought he'd finally fight back, but Peak did nothing. He simply picked up the food from the dirty floor and ate in silence. Some inmates laughed. Some called him mad, but Gus watched and said he did the right thing. "If I were him, I'd do the same. Hunger doesn't care about pride." Later, all the inmates were taken to bathe. As Peak quietly showered, Bear and his goons cornered him again. "Nothing's free here," Bear growled. "You want to survive, you pay." They ordered him to kneel. When he refused, they forced him. It was their twisted rule. 5 brutal kicks as punishment. Bear delivered the first blow. Then he turned to Fluke and said, "Your turn. Hit him." Fluke stood frozen. When he refused, they threatened him. "If you don't, you'll be next." Fluke eventually gave in to Bear's threats, but he couldn't bring himself to hurt Peak badly, so he kicked him gently. 2 more blows remained. Bear, furious, wanted Peak broken. He ordered his men to finish him. Sensing real danger this time, Peak tried to defend himself. His defiance enraged Bear, who unleashed another violent beating with his crew. Peak was left unconscious on the floor. Then, a flashback. Young Peak, boxing in underground matches for cash. Returning home bruised, his mother asked why he kept doing this. "Because you sell drugs," he replied. "People laugh at me. I don't want to survive on dirty money." Back to the present. Peak is dragged to his feet by the warden. "You've got 5 minutes, he growled. "If I come back, you'll regret it." Fluke was waiting. With a quiet apology and an orange in hand, he introduced himself to Peak. It was the first time they shared their names, a fragile moment of connection in that cruel place. Meanwhile, the warden warned Bear, "You're making this place worse." When Bear learned Fluke had gone to give Peak an orange, his rage exploded. The warden lit a cigarette and told Bear, "Do what you want. Just finish before I'm done." The second he walked away, Bear began beating Fluke savagely. No one stepped in. Everyone just watched. But Peak couldn't. Seeing Fluke attacked, he leapt in. "If you've got guts, fight me," he shouted, flooring one of Bear's men with a powerful kick. Just as chaos erupted, a leader named Golf intervened. "Enough!" he yelled. Golf wanted both Peak and Fluke in his block, but Bear wasn't letting go so easily. "They're mine," he growled. Soon, Gus, another gang leader, stepped in. After a heated standoff, Bear relented, giving up one of them. Golf chose Peak. Now Peak had protection. Messing with him meant war with the whole gang. That night, while others slept, Gus noticed Peak still awake. "Why did you save me?" Peak asked. "Why leave Fluke with those animals?" Gus replied, "Because you're different. You won't survive by staying silent, but he'll obey, stay quiet, and survive, somehow." Peak quietly thanked him. Golf handed him a wooden knife. "I carved this myself. Use it if you ever have to." That night, Peak slept in peace. But for Fluke, it was hell. Bear and his men tortured him all night for helping Peak. By morning, Fluke's health had worsened. As inmates were being brought out, Golf noticed Peak was still asleep. He shook him, no response. For a moment, he feared the worst. But then, suddenly, Peak sat up and held the knife to Golf's throat. Golf lost in the trauma of what he'd endured. But as reality returned, he remembered he was safe now, away from those monsters. Over time, life began to change for Peak. Slowly, peace crept into his world. He started bonding with others, especially Gus's group. Sometimes Gus would even share his food with him. With regular meals and a sense of safety, Peak's health and spirit began to heal. But for Fluke, life was still a nightmare. Bear and his gang tormented him daily. Mentally, emotionally, he was hanging by a thread, close to giving up. Days later, Peak got a visitor. Purr. Her presence brought a brief smile to his face, a rare moment of warmth. But that smile quickly faded. Purr came with devastating news. His mother had passed away in prison. Peak broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. As if that wasn't enough, Pear told him she wouldn't be coming to see him anymore. "I just came to tell you," she said. "You're on your own now." As Peak pleaded through tears, she walked away without looking back. Meanwhile, Gus had a conversation with his father. After serving over 10 years, Gus had arranged schooling and a job to start fresh after release. But when he learned his father was still living with his stepmother, the woman who'd destroyed their family, his hope turned to silent rage. He walked away without saying a word. As Peak tried to cope with his pain, he saw Bear attacking Golf. Without hesitation, he stepped in to protect him. But before things escalated, the warden arrived and ordered everyone to the ground. Tension between the prison blocks was boiling over. Gus warned Bear, "Keep pushing, and I'll be forced to stop you." But that's exactly what Bear wanted, a showdown to prove his dominance. Later that night, while everyone slept, Bear approached Fluke. "I don't need him anymore," he said coldly to his men. "Do whatever you want." Fluke had had enough. He tried to fight back, but that only enraged them more. One by one, they assaulted him. No one came to help. The warden didn't respond to his screams. He was left half dead, crumpled on the stairs, stripped of every ounce of humanity. But then he heard them talking. Bear and his gang were grinding blades into powder to poison Peak's food. The plan was already in motion. The next day, they slipped it to the cook. Now, all they had to do was wait. But in Gus's block, everyone shared food, so there was no telling who would eat the deadly meal. Bear didn't care who died. He just wanted blood. When the poisoned plate landed in Peak's hands, Fluke suddenly grabbed it and ate it himself, sacrificing his life to save his friend. The razor shards tore through his throat and stomach. He collapsed in agony. Peak rushed to help, but Gus held him back. "We can't save him now," he said quietly. Fluke's painful death only escalated the tension between both prison blocks. The next day was chosen for the inevitable gang war, timed perfectly when the guards would be distracted. Peak was drowning in guilt, barely speaking. Paragus tried to shake him out of it. "You can't undo what's done," he said. "Tomorrow it could be me, or you. Who will you mourn next?" The yard turned into a battlefield. Weapons were drawn and chaos erupted. Gus lunged at Bear, but his blade barely made a dent. Bear had armor underneath. In return, Bear stabbed Gus repeatedly. The guards stormed in, beating everyone down, demanding to know who started it. But no one spoke. Everyone was sent back to their blocks. That night, Peak noticed Gus lying under a blanket, sweating despite the heat. He touched his forehead, burning. When he lifted the blanket, a sharp object was lodged in Gus's stomach. Peak screamed for help. Golf tried pulling it out, but the pain was too much. Everyone ignored them, pretending not to hear. Gus, barely holding on, looked at Peak and said, "They're just like us, lost, alone. After me, they'll look to you. Take care of them." And with that, Gus took his final breath. Silence followed. News of Gus's death shattered his father. He had waited 10 long years for his son's release, only to lose him days before freedom. Enraged, Peak and Golf tried to kill Bear, but were caught. Bear, smug and cruel, offered Peak a choice. "If you want to kill me, fight me. Let's see what you've got." He never thought Peak would accept, but Peak stared him down and agreed. Golf set the fight for the next evening, even adding, If I lose, you can kill me too. That night, while sharpening his blade, Peak confessed, I've heard people think of their mother before they die. I can't stop thinking about mine. He feared this was the end. Golf reassured him, don't think, just survive. If not tomorrow, then maybe the day after. The next day, the bathroom became their battleground. Before the fight, Golf made Bear remove his clothes, suspecting hidden armor. Who told you? Bear sneered. Gus's ghost? Then, the fight began. Bear charged with wild confidence. Peak, filled with fear, stumbled. Each strike shook him. He wasn't as skilled or brutal. Panic showed in every move. He was losing. Until he paused and remembered his old boxing days. Back then, it wasn't about brute force. It was about strategy, thinking before striking. He gripped his blade, mind sharpening. The real fight had just begun. Seizing the moment, Piyuk struck Bear's leg, sending him crashing to the ground. Without hesitation, he drove the blade into Bear's stomach again and again. Bear's friend tried to intervene, but Golf shoved him back. Piyuk then strangled Bear, ending it once and for all. Moments later, the guards stormed in, ordering everyone back to their cells. Furious, the warden beat the three of them with his stick. When you sewer rats don't care about your lives, why should we? He snapped, before locking them up again. Inside the cell, Golf reassured Piyuk, don't overthink it. We did what had to be done. His death made this place a little more livable. The next morning, Golf woke to find Piyuk still awake, silently staring out. Then, something unexpected happened. The warden returned, this time with warm, delicious food. His tone had changed too. If you want more days like this, he said, you need to get out of here. This place will never give you peace. He informed them they were being transferred to better prisons, where life was far from what they'd known here. As they were taken outside and loaded into separate vehicles, Golf and Piyuk exchanged one last look, a silent farewell. Piyuk had learned hard truths in that hellhole, but now he'd walk a new path alone. Whether this next chapter held hope or more pain, only time would tell.